today? Okay, good that. Good to see you all. Here we are again, chewing some tough bones today. We're going to begin with a few prayers, some of which you know, but Mary Ellen may put them up anyway. Sangye churang soke chognam la, changchu baru dagni kapsu chi, dagi chunen gipe sognam ki, drola penchu sangye drupa sho. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye churang soke chognam la, jangchu bardu dagni kapsu chi, dagi chunen gipe sognam ki, drola penche sangye drupa sho. So saying those words, try to think of the meaning, taking refuge in the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Sometimes, in India, sometimes they just say the Triratna. Sometimes they enunciate Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. When in the Pali tradition these days, in the Theravada countries, they say, what is it? Buddhanam saranam gacchami. I go for refuge to the Buddha. I go for refuge to the Dharma. I go for refuge to the Sangha. Here we're taking refuge not to the ordinary Sangha, which would include, generally, when we say Sangha, it would include actual Sangha are the Arya beings. So it would include the Hinayana Aryas. But when we say the Supreme Assembly, here we're taking refuge in the Bodhisattva Aryas, on the bhumis, so that they have not only realization of emptiness, but firm bodhicitta. And then we ourselves make commitment to, to achieve enlightenment through the collections of merit and wisdom. And then the short mandala offering. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers. So if you have a mandala plate, usually what one would do at the beginning is you would take a little bit of perfumed water, saffron or other, and wipe the surface and put some flower leaves on it first. So that's the ground upon which you're building your mandala. Adorned with Mount Meru, so you'd put rice or other grains in the center, barley, whatever, the 4 continents, the 4 cardinal directions, subcontinents, the precious substances and so forth, the sun and the moon, visualized as a Buddha realm. By offering this, may all migrators enjoy such a pure realm. And then, O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that accumulate in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom. So understanding that the Dharmakaya has 2 aspects, the wisdom Dharmakaya and the nature Dharmakaya, the Svavavikakaya. So the Svavavikakaya is like space. And when it says Dharmakaya wisdom, that implies also the wisdom Dharmakaya. From that, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Radnam Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay, good to see you. We're going to do a little meditation to begin with. As we get into the 6th chapter, we'll be spending a little more time in our preparation meditating on emptiness, but here we're still on the ordinary, we're still ordinary beings, even though we're talking about the bhumis. So we're going to begin sitting comfortably, relaxing your body and mind, recognizing your respiration. And through relaxing your mind, remembering I don't have to think of anything else now, focusing your mindfulness, keeping breathing in your mindfulness, holding it without letting it be distracted, without letting your mind be distracted to anything else. So although mindfulness is a mental factor, one of the kunruanga, the omnipresent mental factors, you can still have wisdom present. And so at first, the wisdom is just recognizing when the breathing is going in and when it's going out, when it's changing directions. And also familiarizing with the nature of the wind element, the air element, which is defined as that which is light and moving, just like the definition of the fire element is that which is hot and burning. You should be like a Swiss or German teacher in class that very strict, doesn't let you get distracted. So if you notice your mind being distracted, you should chastise yourself, hit yourself over the knuckles with a ruler, and go back to being mindful of just the breathing. And with the mind a little bit relaxed, having let go of other distracting thoughts, focus now instead of on the breathing, focus instead on the mental consciousness, first of all, which you know through its contents. And then once you recognize its contents, the thoughts that you're thinking, the images that are coming, the memories, the hopes and emotional states that might be present, using that as your cue, so to speak, instead of focusing on the objective thoughts within your mind or the objective emotional states, focus instead on the subjective nature of the mind within which they're arising, that which is clear in knowing. And here we're focusing on the clarity directly. Indirectly, we're focusing on the knowing. Also, we're knowing the knowing. Here, this clarity means a conventional clear light nature. We have a choice. We don't have to follow the thoughts. They are not the nature of our mind. They can be, well, they can absorb back into the consciousness as we don't focus on them. Understanding this clear light nature, conventional clear light nature, which is the developmental Buddha potential, that once we leave this state, we have the confidence that we can develop virtuous states of mind. There's no obstacle in the consciousness that prevents qualities that we lack now from being developed. This is a quality that all sentient beings have, even those in the hell realms, the animal realm, Preta realm, and so forth. Evil beings, Maras, and so forth. Yet we have the ability right now to recognize this because we have this auspicious moment, this life of leisure and endowment that the Buddha praised in so many sutras that most people are oblivious to, that we have everything we need. We're free, we're enriched, we're endowed with everything we need to practice the Dharma for ourselves to overcome our problematic states of mind, our emotions, our depression, our low self-worth, and instead to develop all of the admirable, wonderful states of mind, love and compassion and patience, renunciation especially bodhicitta and the wisdom that realizes emptiness. And through this, we can take the essence of this auspicious moment, this life of leisure and endowment, like the proverbial stork in India or water bird that can put its long beak into a pond of murky water within which milk has been poured and let all of the dregs filter out through the holes in the bottom of its beak and just take the essence. So we can filter our experiences rather than inappropriately attending to pleasures or what is unpleasant. We can recognize the essence that this is a result of our past karma. We can aim to overcome our problems and not only find happiness and peace now, but achieve moksha and liberation. Or more meaningful than that, moksha for ourselves, more meaningful than that, to achieve enlightenment, where we are not only concerned with our own escape from cyclic existence, but intent on helping others out of, let's say, first of all, empathy, mercy, full-fledged compassion for them, recognizing their kindness, sentient beings' kindness, all of whom have been our mother numberless times, all of whom are equal with us in whatever states they are now, whether they be in hell or animal or a rascally human being, God realms, whatever, they all want to be happy, want to be free of suffering. We all are equal in having the Buddha nature. We're all equal in having the rights to achieve that liberation or enlightenment. In order to achieve enlightenment, to benefit sentient beings, I need to accumulate the collections of merit and wisdom, which I have an opportunity to do now through listening to the teachings on Lama Tsongkhapa's great text, The Illumination of the Intent, the Gompa Rapsel, where we can learn the details of how to accumulate merit, how to prevent creating negative karma, and how we can learn how to accumulate the collection of wisdom that realizes the emptiness of inherent existence of all phenomena, self and others. This is the prerequisite in order to achieve the two Buddha bodies of Rupakaya and Dharmakaya. Rupakaya, the Nirmanakaya and Sambhogakaya bodies, the cooperative condition is the collection of merit. The substantial condition or substantial cause is the, from a tantric point of view, is the subtlemost wind. And the cooperative condition for achieving the Dharmakaya is the collection of wisdom. The substantial cause is the subtlemost mind. So think, I'm going to listen, contemplate, and meditate on the material being presented today with the intention of accumulating the two collections in order to become a Buddha, so that I can effortlessly, spontaneously, and without error lead all sentient beings out of all suffering into stable, everlasting, blissful happiness. I'm going to participate in the teachings today in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And then relax, bring your attention back to the present, using similar kind of logic, elaborated or condensed according to your understanding. For instance, many of the motivational prayers that come similar to what we just have been doing say, recognizing that I have, from numberless lives in the past, been immersed in samsara, with, following the 8 worldly dharmas. I've never made any substantial progress toward enlightenment before. Numberless lives. Maybe there have been periods when I encountered the Dharma, I practiced and gave up, but that this is a goal that has an end. Unlike, accumulating wealth, you might think you've reached the end of the accumulation of wealth when you become the richest person in the world or the Forbes 500 or whatever. But all of that has to be left behind. You have to start again. Every time you shave your face or your legs, you might think, oh, now now my face is nice and smooth, or my legs are nice and smooth, but you have to do it again. But the quest for enlightenment, the work for enlightenment, is something that has an end. You can achieve that. So, how are we doing? Anyone have a question about the meditation or a question from previous classes? What are we doing? Oh, Anna.
And well, thank you for the opportunity to ask a question, but also always for the beautiful meditation at the beginning and setting a motivation. My question to you is, would you mind repeating again what the two causes are for the Dharmakaya and the Nirmanakaya bodies? Just that part of the meditation again.
Yeah, usually we say that the substantial cause, so you know the difference between substantial cause and cooperative condition. Say, for instance, when you plant a seed, the seed is the substantial cause of the sprout that will eventually come up, if it does come up, right? That's the substance that transforms into the sprout. So the substantial cause of the wisdom, let's say of the Dharmakaya, the wisdom Dharmakaya, is our consciousness. It's our consciousness, our deluded consciousness now, that having taken out all of the dross, all of the faults and everything, and imbued it with qualities that will eventually become the Dharmakaya. So from the point of view of, in Sutra, we say consciousness. From the point of view of Tantra, we say subtlemost consciousness, because our gross consciousness that we're kind of experiencing now is not that which is the substance that becomes the wisdom Dharmakaya. It's the subtlemost consciousness. The cooperative condition to achieve that Dharmakaya is the, analogous to the water and the nutrient that, the neutrophil or whatever it is that you put on your plants, or the compost, the sunlight and so forth. The cooperative condition to achieve that Dharmakaya is the collection of wisdom. Okay. So the Nirmanakaya, the substantial cause, from the Tantra point of view, is the subtlemost wind. So in Tantra, we say that the consciousness and its mounting winds are never separated. They're of one entity, right? You've heard that before? Yeah. So even though other winds, say our breathing and other winds within our body may not be mounts for consciousness, there are certain winds that are the mounts for consciousness, like the horse and the rider. The horse is like the winds, and the rider is like the consciousness. Sort of if you've been Velcroed or super glued onto the saddle, that's kind of it, like you're inseparable. The two are inseparable. So that's that subtlemost wind that mounts, that is the mount of the subtlemost mind, is the substantial cause that will become the form bodies. It will eventually, that wind can manifest as the form of the Sambhogakaya or as the Nirmanakaya. And it's the cooperative condition is the accumulation of merit as opposed to the accumulation of wisdom. Is that answer? Okay. Okay, good to see you. So anyone else have a...
Can I ask a follow-up to that? Because
Okay.
the way you the way you described it, it makes them sound like they're like, I mean, you're not really super gluing them together like the Dharmakaya or the
You're not
wisdom.
super gluing them together. They are super glued together.
Well,
They
because
are
like the Dharmakaya is penetrating the whole wind, correct?
the Dharmakaya, wisdom Dharmakaya, right? As opposed to the nature Dharmakaya, the wisdom Dharmakaya, the omniscient mind is a consciousness. It's a conventional phenomena. It has the capacity to understand the ultimate nature of phenomena and the conventional nature of phenomena. But wherever that mind is, it is accompanied by its subtlemost wind. So, for instance, the Buddha's mind pervades all phenomena, all universes. So from here, if you expand it out in different kind of meditation, you expand out to the rest of the world, to say to your neighborhood, the country, the county, the country, the world, the solar system. I'm trying to put my arms, out to other stars within our local group, into the stars of the galaxy where there are other possible world systems, then to the other galaxies that are related with our Milky Way galaxy, out to, further and further to the extent that scientists now call the universe. Then beyond that, to other universes that are also in various degrees of creation, abidance, or destruction, some different degrees, to all the extent of where sentient beings live. So that mind knows that. So the wind that mounts that is the mount of, which that mind is mounted on, accompanies that consciousness there. So if the Buddha wanted to emanate a body, say want is not the right word, but say if it was necessary for the Buddha to emanate a body somewhere, trillions of world systems away, he could do so instantly because the mind is there, therefore the body is there. So that's why when we do invocation of the Buddhas, it's not as though they have to come from somewhere else. They're already here. When you invoke the Buddhas, like light comes from the hung at your heart and invites all of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and Dakas and Dakinis and protectors and everything to here in front. They're already here, but this is a device, Lama Yeshe used to say, a psychological device for you to revivify in your mind the presence of the omniscient mind and so forth. So it's not as though that we create this union of mind and wind. They are inseparable from the beginning. Our subtlemost mind and wind have existed inseparably from beginningless time. The gross minds and gross winds within our body now that are temporarily linked, they will say disappear when we die, when all the air's absorbed to the heart chakra at the time of death. But the subtlemost mind and wind, that continues on inseparably. Okay, maybe that's enough. Okay, Ida, you have a question? You have a thought?
Could you say that our contaminated consciousness is a substantial cause for the Dharmakaya body?
The Dharmakaya, usually we don't say body, but you could interpret that as body. Usually the word kaya, when we talk about kaya, we say, what do we say? Kaya vakchita. Kaya means body, vak means speech, chitta means mind. But when you talk about Dharmakaya, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a physical body. Kaya also means collection. So when you talk about the Dharmakaya, it's the collection of all the mental elements. And so what was your question again?
Well, let me rephrase it then. Did you say that our contaminated consciousness is a substantial cause of the Dharmakaya collection?
Yeah, so you could say that, but probably more precisely, you'd want to say the subtlemost mind, which has our present subtlemost mind, although its nature, its conventional nature is clear light and its ultimate nature is emptiness, it still has within it the seeds of contaminations. So it is not an uncontaminated mind. That subtlemost mind doesn't know emptiness now. So that could be said to be the substantial cause of the wisdom Dharmakaya. Okay. All right. So we're going to start today with this paragraph in Jinpa's text on page 143 in Hopkins text 219. That's in Jinpa's text. It says the conjunction and, quote unquote, in Tibetan, dang. We say Sangye Chu Dang, Sangye Chu, Buddha, Dharma, Dang, and. So Dang means and. The conjunction and, Dang in Tibetan, carries the meaning also, and it is there to include what is not mentioned, namely delusion, or we say timuk, or ignorance. So that's where we're going to start. But just to review where we are, we're in the section just above that says the other pure qualities that arise on this ground. So, William, what ground are we on?
Third one.
Which one?
Third one.
Yeah, you're not William.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I was just checking whether William was.
I don't know whether I'm on it, but we're studying the third ground, yes.
Yes. Whether we ourselves are on the third ground is another question. What we're studying is the third ground, right? Good point. So the other pure qualities that arise on this ground, on the third ground, on this ground, on the third ground, the bodhisattva obtains absorptions and clairvoyances. We say ngunshe, so that it's not just one clairvoyance. There's what we call when we call the common cities, the clairvoyance of emanating bodies and knowing other people's minds, and divine eye and divine ear and so forth, knowing past and future lives. On this ground, the bodhisattva obtains absorptions that were not obtained before, clairvoyances. Here, attachment and aversion come to exhaust completely. So that was something that we talked a little bit about, and that will be coming in the next, just in today's class, what it means to exhaust completely. We had talked about that it seemed like Nagarjuna, also because this is the root verse from Madhyamaka, but also there were quotations from Nagarjuna that said that where did we say? It was it earlier that said there was on this third ground, the bodhisattva exhausted attachment and aversion, but what it means is that they are, a certain level of them have been reduced. So this is just a review now. So just as on this third ground, the bodhisattva attains purity of the perfection of patience, the perfection of forbearance, patience gone beyond, if you want, in the same way that bodhisattva attains the purity of the four absorptions. So when we talk about absorption, samten or dhyana, that's talking about the form realm absorptions, such as the first level of absorption, second, third, and fourth, when it says such as, and exemplified by this, the bodhisattva will attain the four formless attainments. So above in the sense of a more subtle mind, above the form realm consciousnesses or absorptions that we can achieve, even though our body is in the desire realm, our mind can elevate to a mind of the form realm or the formless realm. And there are four levels there also. Jimpa says infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, or as they say, nothing at all, and the peak of existence. Peak of existence means the peak of contaminated existence. It doesn't mean the, Buddhahood or something like that. Peak of existence means the highest mundane phenomena that you can have. The four immeasurables are also attained: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, and the five types of clairvoyance, supernatural feats, which I think he means emanation, divine ear. This is divine ears, I'm not sure. It's a divine ear is a mental consciousness, so I'm not sure why it says ears, but anyway, divine ear, knowledge of others' minds, recollection of previous lives, and divine eye. It's not like you're seeing out of your eyes. Divine eye, divine ear are mental consciousnesses that are able to know what is sounds in other distant places. In the case of divine ear, in the case of divine eye, is able to essentially have a kind of a visual apprehension, sort of seeing the scene at distant places. Although the bodhisattva may enter and exit these absorption states and formless states, seeing that they help to complete the causes of awakening, he or she will take birth through the power of aspiration prayers, thinking especially of this. They will not take birth through the power of the mundane absorptions and formless absorptions, so they no longer are relying on the ripening of karma just by itself, when it says the mundane absorptions and formless attainments, because when you achieve the form realm absorptions or the formless, let's say the form realm concentrations or the formless absorptions, you create a certain kind of karma. What is it called? Do you know, Stephen, what kind of karma you create when you?
Immovable, or I think we also coined the word static.
Okay, maybe static. Immovable karma. What does that mean?
It means that if the karma is created in the formless realm, it will only ripen in that realm. Or if it's created in the form realm, it will only ripen in that realm.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, usually what that means, immovable karma, it means the throwing karma. So I'm not sure it talks about the experiential karma in those realms. It may also, but if you attain even the preparation for the first concentration of the form realm. You don't even have to achieve the first concentration, actual concentration. Just achieving the preparation for that creates what's called immovable karma, and that will only ripen in the maturation of birth in the first concentration in a future life. It will have other effects also. You'll have effects similar to the cause, so you'll be able to, in future lives, you'll have facility to develop that concentration and so forth, but you won't. Immovable karma means that karma can't move or transfer to rebirth in some other place. Okay. Okay, so he or she is able to do this starting from the first ground, but on this ground, in the third ground, the bodhisattva attains a higher training in concentration that is far superior to previous grounds. And with that, they experience greater temptation to take birth through such power. I mentioned that may not be the actual meaning here. Hopkins says, there are now greater doubts, because the Tibetan says, De Wangi, by the power of that or due to that, Keam Nyampe Dokpa Chewe Merso. So it's mentioned since there are greater qualms. Dokpa means what we sometimes say qualms, doubts that think whether or not they will be reborn there. So Thupten Jinpa's translation of temptation, I'm not quite sure where that comes from. So the text continues, this is why this point is mentioned here, because there's a doubt about that on the third ground. And here on this ground, attachment and aversion come to exhaust completely, thus attaining their cessation. So it should be noted, and it will be explained a little bit more further, we don't have complete exhaustion or complete cessation. Let me see what this is. Hopkins, page 219. Where is he saying here? So on this ground, an extinguishment of desire and hatred is attained. So when it says an extinguishment, Jinpa says, here on this ground, attachment and aversion come to exhaust completely, thus attaining their cessation. Hopkins says, on this ground, an extinguishment of desire and hatred is attained. Well, yeah, let's continue on to the next sentence. They run on, although Jinpa has it as a new paragraph. The conjunction and carries the meaning of also, and it is there to include what is not mentioned, namely delusion. That means that there is an exhaustion of what Jinpa is choosing to call delusion here, which we sometimes is another synonym of ignorance. It's timuk, a grosser kind of ignorance. So the meaning of the word exhaust here, sepa usually, right, should not be taken to be total exhaustion or cessation. I'm not sure where Jinpa got in his previous sentence, and here on this ground, attachment and aversion come to exhaust completely, thus attaining their cessation. It doesn't refer to total cessation of all of them, because the delusions the delusions are going to exist. Well, let's say, for instance, the grasping to inherit existence will exist up to the end of the seventh ground, right? there will be some subtle kind of thing. So generally what happens is when we have these cessations, the true cessations, the lower schools, especially in the Hinayana tradition, they talk about 81 levels of afflictions that have to be abandoned. Richard, have you heard about those 81 levels or 81 afflictions?
I've heard of them, but I don't think I could remember more than about 3.
Okay.
You know, yes, I've
So
heard.
maybe even that, maybe you're thinking of something else. So generally what we say is that there are 9 levels, mental levels. When we talk, usually when we talk about the realms of samsara, we say the lower realms and the upper realms, or we say the hell realms. We count hell, preta, animal, human, what do you say, asura, and desire realm, devas. That's the 6 realms, right? And then we talk about of the deva realm, we can extend that into the form absorptions, the form concentrations, the 4 formless absorptions. So if you count them up in a different way, you get the 9 levels. How do you get 9 out of that? Do you know, Don? Have you heard? When we studied back in Land of Medicine Buddha, you may have known, but unmute. So I want to hear your attempt of. If you press your space bar, there you go.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I don't remember, Venerable.
So does anyone know what those 9 levels are? Paul, do you know?
Would that be 3 sets of 3 for desire, form, and formless rooms? Or no? Thinking
Isn't
something
great,
else.
great, middle, great, small.
So Mikhail, let's getting into the 81. So first of all, we talk about the levels. So here, all the lower realms are all the lower realms and the desire realm gods, the asuras and devas of the desire realm are all compressed into one. That's one level, desire realm. Then we talk about the 4 levels of the concentrations and the 4 levels of the formless absorptions. So that makes 9. Okay, so each of those levels, so the desire realm afflictions, especially grasping the inherent existence and so forth, has 9 levels. We talk about the big, so we say, we start with 3 levels. So you say big, medium, and small delusions. So the big delusions are the ones that are going to be abandoned first, right? Or maybe you might think of the small ones would be abandoned first. What big means here is gross. So the example I gave before about cleaning a pot, you know, where the potatoes are stuck to the inside of the pot. First you put your fingers and you grab those, then you get some slightly finer stuff out with a plastic widget, and then you get the finest things out. So you could say there are gross, medium, and small or subtle. And then of the gross or the big, there are 3 levels. There's the big, those are the grossest ones, the medium gross, and the small gross, right? So the gross has 3, the medium has 3 levels, the gross mediums, the big mediums, you know, the full-fledged mediums, the mediums, and the small mediums. We following? Rocio, you follow? The subtle also has 3. The fully fledged, you know, strong small ones, is say the gross small, the medium small, the small small. Further on, Jumpa gets this order wrong. He says in the text, the small great, the medium great, and the great great. Actually, it starts from great great, medium great, small great, or great medium, medium medium, small medium, great small, medium small, small small. So how many is that? It's 9, right? 3 times 3. Each one of those 3 has 3. If you multiply those 9 times the 9 levels, the desire realm, the 4 concentrations, and the 4 formless absorptions, that's 9 states, each of those has 9 levels of things to be abandoned. Melvin, are you there? You off for a cup of coffee? Okay, just checking. Nadine, are you following?
I'm here. I just couldn't figure out how to use my phone.
Oh, okay. What do you think? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I was wondering what the 4 concentrations were.
So the 4 concentrations means the 4 levels of the form realm, because they are called samtens or dhyanas, and that word is often translated as concentration. So that means the first form realm state, the lowest one, the second one, which is finer, which you have to use greater mundane vipassana to achieve. The third level is finer than that, and the fourth level is finer than that. Those are all within what is also called the Brahma realm. The form realm is also called the Brahma realm because the deity Brahma, which came and offered Dharma chakra to the Buddha after the Buddha achieved enlightenment, along with Indra, the king of the desire realm gods. You know this story? Melvin, do you know this?
No, I don't.
So when the Buddha achieved enlightenment, and he, for many days, he just sort of took the aspect of walking around and wondering what to do. He knew what to do, but anyway, so the king of the desire realm gods, Indra, along with Brahma, the king of the form realm, they came and they offered a Dharma chakra, just like when we offer in the pujas requesting the teachings. We often offer a Dharma chakra or visualize a Dharma chakra. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, whenever we were at Deer Park, maybe you remember, Paul, when we were at Deer Park in the Long Life Pujas, Lama Zopa always had this very immense that he had a Dharma chakra that he had fashioned to offer to Geshe Zopa during the Long Life Pujas, sort of symbolizing, requesting the teachings. So Indra and Brahma offered the Dharma chakra. So Indra is the desire realm boss, you might say, king of the highest of the gods, and Brahma is all of the realms of the form realm are called Brahma realms, but the great Brahma lives, I think, in the highest one. Okay, so
Thank you.
Yeah, so we talk about of the desire realm, there are 9 levels of delusions to be abandoned. Of the first form realm, there are 9. Of the second form realm, there are 9. Third, fourth, 4 levels of the formless realm there. Each of them have 9. So there's 9 levels and 9 degrees of afflictions to be abandoned. So that's 81 altogether. So in the lower tenets, in the Hinayana, they say that the arhats, some of the dull arhats have to do them individually and so forth. The Mahayana in general say that they generally abandoned, when you talk about the gross delusions, they abandon the gross of the desire and the form and the formless realms together, simultaneous abandonment. And then there would be the medium gross, or the medium great, of the desire realm, the four formless absorptions, the four form absorptions or concentrations, the four formless absorptions. All of those would be abandoned together. So there are 9, from the Mahayana point of view, there are 9 levels to be abandoned, right? Because you're doing all the 9 realms together. You follow? So first, what would be exhausted or ceased or abandoned would be the gross delusions. Why is that? Because at the beginning, your antidotes, your realization of emptiness, that is the real cause of the abandonment, right? Your realization of emptiness and your accumulation of merit that supports it are not yet, they're sort of like small. So the small antidote gets rid of the big delusions and so forth as you go up. So generally in the Svatantrika, Chittamatra and so forth, they talk about 9 levels. And so from the point of view of them, you don't achieve, from the Svatantrika point of view, you don't get rid of all of the delusions until the 10th bhumi, right? Svatantrika point of view. Prasangika point of view, you get rid of them when? Earlier, right? On the 7th, at the end of the 7th bhumi, at the beginning of the 8th bhumi, you're free of them. So you have to get in those 9 levels in those, let's say, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th bhumis. You have to get those 9 levels in there. So it's not clear in the Prasangika texts. It's not divided like in the Svatantrika texts, like in the 2nd bhumi, you get rid of the great. On the 3rd bhumi, you get rid of the medium great, and so forth, up till the 10th bhumi, because there's 9 levels. Whereas in the Prasangika, you have to get those 9 levels within 6 grounds, right? The 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. Okay, so that said, the meaning of the word exhaust here should not be taken to be total exhaustion. You know, you got rid of all of them. This is talking about the 3rd ground, because it said that the text said, here attachment and aversion come to exhaust completely. You might think you got rid of all of them, but you're not going to get rid of all of those for some time yet. You're getting rid of some of the bigger ones first. For even the sutras state that all 4 fetters or entanglements, you could translate it as, of desire, form, and cyclic existence and ignorance are thinned out. So what is that talking about? Anyone know? No one's read ahead the notes and so forth. So in Hopkins' text, it says, say again?
It's about the afflictions which are abandoned.
Yeah. So here, Hopkins' text for that section says, the extinguishment is not complete, is not exhaustive, because the sutra on the 10 grounds, so when it says in Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary, when it says the sutras say, it's talking about the sutra on the 10 grounds, says that all 4 fetters, desire, form, which means attachment to the form realm, existence, which means attachment to the formless realm, and ignorance are diminished, but not completely destroyed. This is talking about the third ground, right? So they are diminished. So when it said, what did it say? The way that Jimpa translated it, they come to exhaust completely. It means that the certain level to be abandoned on that level, on that bhumi, those that are to be abandoned on that level are completely exhausted. Okay. Jimpa says, all four fetters of desire, form, cyclic existence, and ignorance are thinned out. So again, what that means is it's not talking about the four, the fetters. Remember earlier we talked about 3 fetters or entanglements. Do you remember what those were? On the path of seeing, Nadine, do you remember?
Not wanting to go, having doubts, and following wrong path.
Yeah, not wanting to go would mean what?
The view of the transitory collection.
Yeah,
The view of the transitory collection.
right, because you have that, particular, that's another word, those 3 are called the 3 fetters. So that means if you still have the view grasping to an inherently existent self, you have this kind of fear of going, of reaching, going to liberation, because I would no longer exist, if you still have grasping to that. What were the other 2? So fear of
Afflicted doubt and wrong path is wrong morality, wrong ethics.
right. So another thing that keeps you, that among all the other things that are abandoned, the 3 major ones on the path of seeing, these are called the 3 fetters. So for instance, having doubt would mean, like, if you come to a road, you don't know whether to go this way or that way. So that means afflicted doubt is abandoned. That's one of the fetters. And then holding wrong moralities and forms of ethics and ascetic behavior as supreme, that also is abandoned. It's called one of the fetters, because by following that kind of behavior, one goes down the wrong path. Okay, so this is now talking, when it's talking about fetters here, it's not talking about those 3 fetters. This is talking about 4 fetters, that is attachment to the desire realm, attachment to the form realm, and attachment to the formless realm, which is called existence, as well as ignorance. These are all diminished but not completely destroyed. Okay? How are we doing? Making sense? Jennifer, are you making sense to you? Have you recovered from your sojourn? No, still jet lagged. Okay. Anna, what do you think?
Thank you, Venerable. Here, what is meant by ignorance? Is it the levels that we just talked about, the divisions of all those levels?
So remember when we talked about before, let's see, what is this? Desire, form, existence, and form and ignorance. These are talking about the attachment that's present in the desire realm, in the form realm, the formless realm. And in addition to that, ignorance, which would mean the grasping to an inherently existent, to inherently existent phenomena. So these are thinned out or diminished successively as you go up. Why doesn't it mention anger or hatred? Is that still exists? Nadine, you were about to say something?
It's, anger or hatred is already completely eliminated on the third bhumi. They don't have any cross delusions.
They don't have any what delusions?
Manifest or gross delusions.
Oh,
And anger and hatred is a manifest delusion.
yeah. So there may still be potential for that, but that at that point, that is no longer a problem. Like when we talked about the bodhisattvas getting angry at one another and so forth. By the third bhumi, anger is not a problem, but you still have problem with subtle attachment and subtle ignorance. So the text continues, with respect to what is meant by these statements about exhaustion of attachment, aversion, and delusion on this bodhisattva ground, Asanga's bodhisattva grounds, it's what is that called? The Bodhisattva Bhumi, the text that Asanga wrote in individual composition. I mean, he studied with Maitreya and got 5 texts, but the Bodhisattva Bhumi is different than that. That explains that it is through the power of of mundane meditative absorption and formless attainment that one becomes free from attachment toward desire, form, and formless realms. Or as Hopkins translates, according to Asanga's bodhisattva level, bodhisattva bhumi, the meaning of these is that through the power of meditative stabilization of the worldly concentrations and formless absorptions. Remember what that means, Shanka, when we said mundane absorptions and mundane, mundane concentrations and mundane absorptions? What does that mean?
Well, it's where at each level you're essentially you persuade yourself why the previous level is, why the next level is better than the previous level, so
Right.
forth and so on, but you don't eliminate any of the any of the, I don't know, not fetters, but any of the obscurations, whatever, from
The delusions, yeah, the delusions.
delusions. Yes,
So
yes.
the Bodhisattva grounds explains that it is through the power of mundane meditative absorption and formless attainments. So that means achieving those states through the mundane vipassana. Mundane vipassana is just as Shanka remembered, you're looking at the lower ground, where you are is unsatisfactory, but boy, it'd be nice to be up there, the first form absorption. And then when you get to that, you might get, you think, oh, this is okay, but man, there's still some problems. It would really be nice to be in the second absorption, the second form concentration. So you see the defects of the lower, the advantages of the upper, and analyzing within single pointed concentration. You have shamatha. This is called mundane vipassana. It's called mundane because you're not analyzing the supramundane meaning of phenomena. You're not meditating on emptiness. You're just using your vipassana, this incredible, powerful mind, to see the defects of one, the advantages of the other, and therefore elevating your mind to that level eventually. So Asanga's Bodhisattva grounds explains that it is through the power of mundane meditative absorption and formless attainment that one becomes free from attachment from the desire, form, and formless realms. So this means just a diminishing of that. It doesn't mean total cessation of those. This is the elimination of the manifest level as spoken of earlier. So once you achieve that, let's say you attain the first absorption through the mundane vipassana, you attain the first form realm absorption or concentration. At that point, the desire realm delusions are not manifest in your mind. They are suppressed. In the literature, when you study these things, is the texts that are called samsuk. Paul, do you remember what samsuk means?
Yes, sam and suk, it's short for concentrations and form and formless absorptions. So sam ten tam suk dang suk me.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
So that's a set of texts that one studies when one's studying the Prajnaparamita. So before you study Madhyamaka, first you study collected topics and low rig and the ways of knowing and so forth. You study about the tenets and so forth. That's all preliminary. Then you study Prajnaparamita, essentially the Abhisamaya Alamkara explanation of the three mothers, the 8,000, the 25,000, and the 100,000 verse Prajnaparamita sutras by means of the Abhisamaya Alamkara and Haribhadra's commentary on them. And then you study Madhyamaka. So, but when you're studying the perfections, you study Abhisamaya Alamkara, one of the set of texts that comes up, they're called the Surkushi, the four subsidiary texts. So they talk about the 20 types of Sangha and the form and formless absorptions and Buddha nature and so forth, and dependent origination. I think those are the four. Is that right? Samsuk, that's what we're talking about here, study of these, what did I just say? The 20 Sangha.
20 Sangha, dependent arising.
From the Mahayana point of view, dependent arising talks about the 12 links. That's not talking about the emptiness. And then Rik, which means Buddha nature, both the conventional and ultimate Buddha nature. So that's one of the subjects that's brought. And in that context, when you talk about, when you achieve the first concentration, it's said that you've abandoned the desire realm afflictions. But the abandonment there just means diminishment. They're temporarily abandoned. Okay, so it has to be careful when you read those texts, because it means generally when we say abandoned, we think of total cessation of them. Okay, so this is the elimination of the manifest level as spoken of earlier. So we talked about that before. This seems, therefore, why the word thinned out is used. Hopkins translates that sentence as, the fetters are clearly those explained in the Abhidharma, in the knowledges, the lower Abhidharma and the upper Abhidharma, the Abhidharma Kosha and the Abhidharma Samuchaya, right? They call the lower Abhidharma is the one that Vasubandhu wrote his Abhidharma Kosha about, means the Hinayana tenets, and the Asanga wrote the Abhidharma Samuchaya, which is kind of the Abhidharma of the Mahayana, mainly from the Chittamatra and Svatantrika point of view. So Hopkins translated as clearly, Chimpa says, this seems means like kind of doubt. The word is ngong, which means this is clearly referring to those afflictions that are thinned out. The fetters being thinned out too seem to be the ones mentioned in the Abhidharma texts. He says seem, but it's Jeffrey's translation, I think, is more accurate. It's clearly referring to those. Okay. In connection with this matter at hand, there is the statement in the 10 Ground Sutra, the Dashibhumika, which says, his fetters in the form of views were already eliminated previously. or as Hopkins says, on this, the Sutra of the 10 Grounds, which is quoted in Chandrakirti's commentary. Sometimes Lama Tsongkhapa has added other things. This is actually from Chandrakirti's commentary. It says, the fetters which our views were abandoned earlier. And Jimpa, at this point, Jimpa gives a note 264, right, in your text. Do you see that? 264. His fetters in the form of views were already eliminated. There's a little number 264 over that. That's his note. And that note says, in the Derge Kangyur edition, so that means, the Kangyur is a collection of the Buddha's teachings, right? The Ka, the translation of his speech. The Derge is usually considered one of the more reliable ones of those different collections. There were different printing places in Tibet that had these big wood blocks where they would ink up and they put the parchment on top and they would, roll something on it so the text appears there. You've seen those Tibetan texts, right? Nowadays they're printed on printing presses, but in that time, these wood blocks were collected in various places. They were carved, and they were from various collection of translations that were not always the same. Sometimes they varied a couple syllables or maybe even word sentences. So the Derge is considered one of the most more reliable ones. So in that edition, the sentence reads, those fetters derived from views were already purified even earlier. In the version of the sutra cited in Chandrakirti's commentary, this sentence appears as, these types of fetters were already eliminated previously. Sounds like the same, right? Purified even earlier or eliminated earlier. Okay, so anyway, some explain this sentence. Now we're going back to Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary. Some explain this sentence to mean that the last 3 of the 5 types of false views were eliminated on the path of seeing. So when we talk about views, you remember, we've gone over this many times, but it's always worth it. We talk about 6 root afflictions, right? You say ignorance, attachment, anger, afflicted doubt. What's the other one? Pride. And the 6th one is afflicted view. So we have 5 non-views and 5 views. The 6th afflicted view has 5 varieties. That's what's being talked about here. Here it says, some explain the sentence to mean that the last 3 of the 5 types of afflicted views or false views, actually one of the views is called false view, so it's probably not a good translation. Afflicted views are eliminated on the path of seeing. However, this should not be taken to mean that the acquired dimension of the 5 views has been eliminated on the path of seeing. What does that mean? So Jeffrey translates, the fetters which are views were abandoned earlier. Some explain this as meaning that the latter 3 views, which means perverse view or wrong view, conceiving bad ethics and as well as codes of behavior as superior, and conceiving bad views as superior. Those are the last 3 of the 5 afflicted views, that they were abandoned on the path of seeing. But it should be taken as referring to having abandoned all 5 artificial views on the first ground. All of the artificial views are abandoned on the first ground, right? Or intellectually formed or acquired, or however you like to translate that. Including that of the transitory collection as a real I and mind, and views holding to extremes, extreme view. All 5 acquired views, the intellectually formed afflicted views are abandoned on the path of seeing. That's what Lama Khapa says. How are we doing? Is Jennifer taking a nap? I think she's still trying to de-jet lag. Sean, what do you think?
So I'm still trying to figure this out in my head. So when you talk about the Nirmanakaya being built off of this most subtle wind, is
Well, yeah, you could say that. Yeah, so that's one of the substantial causes of the Nirmanakaya. You could also say the cooperative cause, the main cooperative cause is the collection of merit, and indirectly also the collection of wisdom is also a cooperative condition for that also.
But those things are uncreated, so they have to exist.
What are uncreated?
Like a Nirmanakaya and a Dharmakaya.
No, those are, when you say created, well, it depends on what you mean by created. They
No, I said
are impermanent phenomena.
They have to be uncreated, right?
What do you mean by uncreated? All phenomena, if you say uncreated, there's different meanings of, unborn or uncreated. Sometimes is a synonym for empty of inherent existence. What that means is phenomena are not inherently created. So you could say that they're uncreated, but they are conventionally created. So you have to be careful what you're saying. Another meaning of uncreated means permanent phenomena, things that are not products, not the product of causes and conditions. They are not created by causes and conditions. So the Nirmanakaya is an impermanent phenomena.
So it is an impermanent phenomenon.
And for impermanent phenomenon, I should say. It is created due to causes and conditions. It is not created inherently, and therefore you could say it's uncreated. So when we talk, you read in a lot of the literature, especially in the Kagyu and Sakya and Nyingma traditions, we talk about unborn. Consciousness is uncreated, or consciousness is unborn, or something like that. That means it is not born, it is not created inherently. That means one instant of mind doesn't inherently give rise to the next instant of mind. It's only conventionally arisen.
Well, so am I off in the wrong ballpark then to say that in our current state we have kind of concretized, I don't know if that's even a word.
Concretized? Yeah, that sounds good.
Through our misconceptions of that state, we've kind of covered up the Nirmanakaya or this subtle wind with all these other.
Well, the subtle wind is not yet the Dharmakaya is not yet the Nirmanakaya or Sambhogakaya, right? So, for instance, the subtle wind in the Bardo state, when you die and your subtlemost consciousness finally leaves the body, like when Lama Zopa Rinpoche took the aspect of passing away recently, right? They said he was in Tukdam. What does Tukdam mean? Does anyone know? Shankar, do you know what that word means, Tukdam?
Tukdam, isn't that the clear light meditation at death?
Yeah, that's kind of like the death meditation. Tuk is honorific for chitta, and Dam means maybe holy mind. Paul, do you know? Have you heard what that means, Tukdam?
Nothing more than that, than the etymology that you just gave. Yeah, I think it's like Tuk and Dampa, like highest or holy state of
Mind.
consciousness, mind, something
So,
like
so
that.
when the Lama is in Tukdam, that means they're in they're meditating on emptiness. They've been pronounced dead by the doctors. There's no brain activity. The heart is not beating, but the subtlemost mind is still within the subtlemost, within the indestructible drop at the heart chakra.
Right.
Okay. So that subtlemost mind has the subtlemost wind as its mount. So they are both there together.
Correct. So, but like our physical body is kind of built upon that, correct? Like we've kind of, through our misconceptions, have solidified something that doesn't really exist on top of this thing. And so as we start to pull off these layers, it kind of unveils that, correct? Or am I?
I'm not sure what you're thinking. So in that state, in that subtlemost mental state, the yogis have trained through their meditation during life to recognize that clear light experience as the meaning of emptiness, because they've had to realize emptiness with the gross mind and then bring that realization through the death evolution, to the stages of the death evolution, always trying to remember the meaning of mind of emptiness as the mind has become more and more subtle and more non-conceptual, conceptualizing. So at that point, at the clear light of death, that mind is still conceptual, but it is not conceptualizing. There's a difference. It is not yet what you're experiencing. The clear light is not a direct realization. It is still a conceptual mind. For instance, you can bring to that state a remembering consciousness of the meaning of emptiness. Is like you wake up from a dream and you look around and you see some different colors and things, and then it dawns on you because of remembrance. Oh, this is my room, or I'm in a nightclub. You drank too much. You're just awakened from a drunken stupor or something. You recognize this. So it's like that clear light experience was called all empty. Is not yet a realization of emptiness, but you can graft to that a realization of emptiness. But that's not, I don't think that's what you're asking.
Well, because I think, like, for example, if a Buddha was present, like we would see the Buddha, but the Buddha would be in a Nirmanakaya form, correct? Like what we're perceiving would be the Nirmanakaya.
Well, let me put it this way. The Buddha is present right now, Sean. The Buddha's omniscient mind is omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, right? It knows all, it is present everywhere, and it is all powerful. Often in the Christian tradition, they talk about the Godhead as having those qualities also. So if if omniscient mind is present, the Buddha's form body is there in the form of the subtlemost wind. It may not be manifesting from that state as a Nirmanakaya, but the Buddha is present. So the Buddha is present with you now. It's just.
So what would you say when the Buddha appears versus being present?
Well, when the Buddha manifests to you,
But what I'm saying is, like, if the appearance of the Buddha is present, and
if the Nirmanakaya is present, okay.
So I'm not going to be able to, as an ordinary being, I'm not going to be able to distinguish that from another person who's got
You know,
contaminate.
as a person like ourselves now, we might see the Nirmanakaya as just another guy.
Yeah,
or
like a
girl.
monk.
You know, it could be a monk, you know, Dalai Lama or something. We could see that, we would think that they have faults or something like this. We might think that they have a lot of charisma or something like that. It's only those who have pure karma that actually see the Nirmanakaya. Anyway, let's leave that for later. There's more subtle questions. William, you have a question. You guys have to learn how to unmute quickly. You just press the space bar. There you go.
Yeah, I don't have a space bar.
Oh,
I remember many years ago, one of the first questions I ever asked was, what is it that transmigrates? And it was explained to me that there are three consciousnesses and bodies, the gross consciousness and the gross body, in other words, what you're looking at, and the mind that person has. Then the other is the subtle consciousness and the subtle body, and that this is the yogic body that is described with winds and drops and so on, that in the state of yogic concentration. And that finally, in answer to what transmigrates, there is the very subtle body and the very subtle consciousness or mind.
right.
And
So there's a very subtlemost body is the subtlemost wind.
yes, I understand. I didn't really understand that at the time, but now from your explanation, I see that it's equated. I just thought of it as a very subtle body.
Right. So that it doesn't necessarily have a bodily form at that point. A meditator within that clear light state may cause that subtlemost wind to form a shape of the meditational deity, but they're just meditating on emptiness. They only, when you begin to leave that meditative state, when the winds begin to shake a little, when your samadhi, meditating single-pointedly on emptiness, begins to diminish, the winds begin to shake, and then that may form that divinity that you've been meditating on for years or decades as a meditator. And then when the subtlemost mind goes into the bardo state, you don't take an ordinary bardo body where that subtlemost wind takes a shape due to karma. You take a bardo body in the form of the deity. That's like these great meditators, or like Lama Zopa Rinpoche or the Dalai Lama, other meditators, that from that Tukdam state, that subtlemost mind and wind is what transmigrates, if you want to call it that, from life to life. Okay.
So like Ling Rinpoche, the tutor to the Dalai Lama, was in this Tukdam state for 13 days, just as Tsong Khapa had been in the Tukdam state for 13 days.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I don't know if I thought it was longer than that, but anyway.
But what I was trying to get to was
No, let's not get to anything else. Let's go a little bit further. Let's go a little bit further. So the fetters that are views are eliminated from the ground of, okay. So some explain the sentence to mean that the last three of the 5 types of false views are eliminated on the path of seeing. However, this should be taken more correctly. It means that the acquired dimension of the 5 views, the intellectually formed views, have been eliminated on the path of seeing. The Bodhisattva Bhumi, however, reads this in the following way. the fetters that are views are eliminated from the ground of engagement by imagination, because it is there that one first aspires to the suchness of the ultimate nature of things. That's kind of hard to understand, right? Hopkins' translation helps. Asanga's Bodhisattva levels says, Bodhisattva Bhumi says, the fetters which are views were abandoned in their manifest form from the first level of engagement through belief. So what does that mean? Jimba doesn't explain what that means. Engagement through belief means the path of accumulation and preparation. How did Jimpa translate it as the ground of engagement by imagination? Or you could say so in other words, on the path of accumulation and path of meditation, path of accumulation, path of preparation, before the path of seeing, you're engaging by means of belief or imagination. That means you're engaging emptiness by means of imagining it, intellectually formed realization, intellectual realization of emptiness. It's still a realization, but it's by means of a mental image, or here by mupa in Tibetan also means belief. So usually we translate it like that, engagement through belief. So the fetters which are views were abandoned in their manifest form earlier on the path of accumulation and preparation, which are called engagement through belief, because of, in other words, believing in the suchness that is the nature of phenomena. So that you believed in that, you imagined that, but you could actually realize it, but it's not a direct realization. So it's called engagement through imagination or belief. A little bit like in Tantra also, in the generation stage, that's called engagement by belief, or and in the completion stage is when you actually actualize things in Tantra. So it's a little bit similar to that. Okay, how are we doing? The fetters that are views are eliminated from the ground of engagement, the path of accumulation and preparation, engagement by imagination, because it is there that one first aspires to suchness or believes in suchness of the ultimate nature of things. So, Thupten Jimba's translation is an incredible feat, but still almost you need to have some other commentary to understand what he's trying to say there. I mean, Lama Tsongkhapa said it, even Lama Tsongkhapa's words, you have to analyze. Is this meant, Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary is not meant for something like, you can go to the bathroom and sit on the toilet and read it, and, like a Sports Illustrated or something like this, and get the gist. You have to analyze what is being said here, even the scholars. So we ourselves, who are relative beginners, we need to think about this a lot. Okay? Paul, what are you thinking? You're on your iPad. So
No, it's just I have the PDF, and so I have to switch back to the Zoom app, and then it takes a second for me to. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, I mean, it's not even, I would say it's worse than that. You have to kind of spend years reading and rereading. And when we would study these things, with Hopkins, it's like you taking a graduate class, and you don't read 100 pages. You read 3 pages for a week, and then you read those 3 pages, and then you read them again, and you read them again, and then you try to figure out that exactly what every sentence is saying. And you just have to really.
And then you go to class with Jeffrey, and then he points out that you didn't understand.
Exactly. Then he tells you have no idea what it says, and then he explains what it says, and then you have to go back and read those pages again and think about it.
But it's not insurmountable. The analogy I gave in some of the earlier courses of Newton, Isaac Newton, having read this great mathematical treatise when he was a youth, he was growing up, First time he read it, he didn't understand anything. Second time he read it again. Second time, understood a little bit because of the connections. He'd gone through the whole text and understood a little. So now things started to make sense. The third time he read it made more sense. So same thing with studying a text like this, or Madhyamaka Vatara, Nagarjuna's text, Fundamental Wisdom. You may go through it. You shouldn't have the expectation that you know everything perfectly from having read that. Maybe if you read the Sports Illustrated, you might have thought, so-and-so hit so many homers, the double plays or stole so many bases or something. But this is not like that. This is much more subtle. But you will understand, we are leaving imprints in our mind now that when we encounter this in the future lives, same material, it will go very, very quickly. The example that's told so many times of the pigeon in a Sanga's cave when he was reciting, I think it was the sacred names of Manjushri. This pigeon just sort of it just happened to go in his ears, but in his future life, he was born as Stiramati, who became a Sanga's, Vasubandhu's disciple. Was it Vasubandhu maybe it was Vasubandhu who was reciting this. He became Vasubandhu's disciple, who was most adept in Abhidharma, just from having heard these things. So we are humans, and you are studying it, hopefully. So you can expect, maybe even in this lifetime, the next time you hear these kind of teachings, that will become much more clear. So don't worry. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say. So next, in that same sutra, it states that false attachment, aversion, and delusions, which are not likely to recede for many hundred thousands of eons, are eliminated on this ground. I'm not sure. What does that sound to you like? Not likely to recede. I think that's a misinterpretation. Hopkins translates further on. The sutra says, so this is still in the Dashabhumika Sutra, that wrong desire, hatred, and ignorance, which had not decreased over 100 trillion eons, are abandoned on the third ground. So he takes it completely differently. Jimpa says, which are not likely to recede. That's talking about the future, right? Hopkins is taking it as those that have not been diminished, have not decreased over 100 trillion eons, are abandoned on the third ground. So not clear exactly which of those is correct. But anyway, on the third ground, delusions that have existed in the past and never decreased are eliminated, or you can say that might continue in the future are eliminated. This should be understood as the elimination of their seeds. Right? When we talk about the delusions, we can talk about suppressing them when their seeds are still there. You attain the first concentration, the seeds of the desire realm afflictions are still there, but they are the afflictions are subdued or abandoned in the sense of being suppressed or minimized, so they don't arise. They don't arise manifestly, but they're not abandoned. But here, when we talk about elimination of their seeds, that means a total cessation, right? When you eliminate the delusions from their seeds, that means there's no way that delusion can arise. When you, in the form realm, if you lose that concentration, you might, when you arise from that concentration, your desire realm delusions are much subdued. But over time, if you don't meditate a lot, those desire realm delusions, as the seeds are still there, can arise. They've only been suppressed. But when the seeds are eliminated, when you have a true cessation of those, no matter what, they're not going to come back again. This should be understood as the elimination of their seeds, and that too in terms of the specific object of abandonment relinquished on that ground. So here's the technical terminology. So there are certain group of delusions that are to be abandoned on the path of seeing. Those are the intellectually formed delusions, right? Afflictions. On the second bhumi, the third bhumi, each has a certain portion of delusions that are to be abandoned there. It's not kind of a random thing like, you know, when Paul meditates as opposed to when I meditate, we on the bhumi, we get different results. There's a certain number of things that are to be abandoned on that path. This should be understood as the elimination of the seeds, and that too, those elimination of the seeds in terms of the specific objects of abandonment to be abandoned or relinquished on this ground. Of the innate afflictions relinquished or abandoned on the path of meditation, the first six, the three levels of the great and the three levels of the medium, are correlated with the second to seventh bodhisattva grounds. So you may have wondered why I was talking about these 9 levels of delusions, right? Here he says the first 6, let's go back to the beginning of the sentence, of the innate afflictions. So the acquired afflictions were abandoned on the path of seeing, right? First ground. Then of the innate afflictions to be relinquished on the path of meditation. So that's the second through the 7th grounds, right? Path of meditation. Or is it? Path of meditation only goes up to the 7th ground? KT, what do you think? I see a couple
I thought that goes all the way to the 10th bhumi and then no more learning.
Right, exactly. But when you talk about the afflictions to be abandoned on the path of meditation,
Then we go through like we hit the 7th, and then I think we're through with the bigs and the mediums of the levels.
Well, we're also free of the small, great, small, medium, small, small,
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah, the medium.
all of the afflictions are abandoned at the end, by the end of the 7th bhumi. So let's read this again. Of the innate afflictions relinquished on the path of meditation, so that would have to be between the 2nd and the 7th bhumis, because after that there's no more to be abandoned. The first 6, the 3 levels of great and the 3 levels of the medium, are correlated with the 2nd to 7th bodhisattva grounds. And so he has a note there. What does he say in that note? I've forgotten. I didn't write that down. 267. What is relinquished by the path of meditation? This is note 267. What is relinquished, means abandoned or ceased by the path of meditation, is divided into 9 parts. So this is where I said that his terminology was wrong. He says small great, middling great, great great. Actually, it's great great, medium great, small great. Then he says small of middling. It should be great middling, middling middling, and small middling. And he says great small. Oh, he gets this right. Great small, middling small, small small. So he gets the last one right. Of these, it is the first 6 that are relinquished from the 2nd to the 7th grounds. Let me see what Jeffrey says here. Jeffrey.
So the first six means all the three greats and the three mediums.
That seems to be what is being said there. Let me just see how. So the fetters which are using further on, the sutra says, this is reading from Jeffrey. So Paul, if you have an iPad, this is what I do. I have two iPads and I'm in my computer. So I'm fortunate. I don't have to go from one to the other. So further on, the sutra says that wrong desire, hatred, and ignorance, which have not decreased for 100 trillion eons, are abandoned on the third ground. We already finished that. This refers to abandoning the seeds, which in turn refers to the objects of abandonment of this ground in the context of abandonment of the 6 levels of gross and middling afflictions, these being abandoned on the path of meditation by means of the 2nd through 7th grounds. So that is, let me see, this is what, page 220, so I have to go back. So that is note what? In Jeffrey's text. What does it say there?
267.
Note 104 in Jeffrey's
note 104, right?
Yeah.
Right. So you have to go to the end of the text. Note 104 says, see Sopa and Hopkins' practice and theory of Tibetan Buddhism. So
that's Kongtrul Chigme Wangbo's tenets.
Yeah, so that's the text that used to be called
that's now, yeah, now it's called Cutting Through Appearances.
Cutting Through Appearances, if you want to try to get it done. Oh, what did I do here? Okay. I've got some other thing on the screen there. So in that text, now called Cutting Through Appearances, if you happen to have that, the first part, it used to be called Practice and Theory of Tibetan Buddhism. So the first part was kind of like the Jorcho Puja practice, doing kind of like a similar to Lama Chopa. And then the last part was the tenets. So on page 212, it says, there are 9 levels: the desire realm, 4 form and 4 formless realms. Each level has 9 series of obstacles to be abandoned. The big, the middle big, the small big, the big middle, and so forth. So let's continue on. Let's see if we can just get a little bit further here.
Wait, I'm sorry, you were reading from page 212 of Cutting Through Appearances?
Did I say 212? Yeah, I'm not sure now that I've taken it off.
Okay, because I'm looking for it. And I'm just trying. I'm not seeing it. So that's
so on page Geshe Zopa Jeffrey Hopkins Cutting Through Appearances, page 212.
Oh, okay.
There
I see. There's a table. That's the one you're talking about.
Yeah, there are 9 levels. Well, I think there's some either before the table or right after. There's this prose in parentheses. There are 9 levels: the desire realm, 4 form and 4 formless realms. Then end parentheses and bracket. Each level has 9 series of obstacles that are to be abandoned. Do you see that? Okay, so that's
I don't, but maybe you have a different edition than I do. But in any case, I'll look for it.
Yeah, good for you. Okay. So it's still a little bit confusing. The first 6, the 3 levels of the great and the 3 levels of medium, are correlated with the 2nd to 7th bodhisattva grounds. So where are the other ones eliminated, right? The commentaries author, Chandrakirti. So what does that mean? Chandrakirti wrote the Karikas, Madhyamaka Karikas, and he wrote his own auto commentary. So that's what's referred to here, the Bhasham. It does not speak explicitly of the elimination of the acquired afflictions on the first ground. It doesn't talk about that explicitly, although that's known from other texts. And it doesn't talk of the elimination of the innate delusions. He says the innate dimension, the intellectually formed afflictions, from the 2nd ground onward. But Nagarjuna's precious garland, right, which we've quoted very often because at the beginning of the text, we said that was one of the ways that Chandrakirti's text enters into or supplements fundamental wisdom. Fundamental wisdom by Nagarjuna is just talking about emptiness, emptiness, emptiness. But the Madhyamaka Avatara supplements that or introduces that subject by adding other things like quotations from Precious Garland and other texts by Nagarjuna. So he says, but Nagarjuna's precious garland states that until the eighth ground is attained, there is no annihilation of the seeds of the afflictions. Let's see, what does I got to get to the right page now. We're at page 200 or something, right?
220, George.
220. Okay, there we go. 200, 220. So Hopkins says here, "14, 15, sorry. 17, 18, 19, 20. So Nagarjuna's precious garland explains that until the eighth ground is attained, this is reading from Hopkins, the seeds of all afflictions are not removed. Jimpa says, until the eighth ground is attained, there is no annihilation of the seeds of the afflictions. Does that sound right? That seems to say until you reach the eighth ground, there is no annihilation of the seeds. There's no cessation of the delusions. But Hopkins translates that as until the eighth ground is attained, the seeds of all afflictions are not removed. Jimpa's left, if he put the word all in there, until the eighth ground is attained, there is not annihilation of all the seeds of the afflictions. That makes sense. To say that there's no annihilation of the seeds until the 10th ground means, until the eighth ground means that until you reach the eighth ground, you haven't abandoned anything. You haven't annihilated any of the delusions. I think that's wrong.
Well, it has to be wrong, doesn't it? Because it conflicts that other statement where it said the attachment and aversion come to exhaust completely.
Yeah, exactly. So we know that you're successively abandoning them. Jimpa's just left off this crucial word all. Until the eighth ground is attained, he says, there is no annihilation of the seeds of the afflictions. You should see, there is no annihilation of all the seeds. There is not annihilation of all the seeds of the afflictions. Grasping at true existence must be considered an affliction. We've already studied before earlier. For the Prasangika point of view, grasping to inherent existence, true existence, is not something other than an affliction. The lower tenets say you don't need that to achieve liberation. You don't, the afflictions, all the afflictions can be eliminated by realizing the absence of a self-supporting, substantially existent person. Prasangika says that's not the case. Grasping to inherent existence is an affliction, and in order to achieve liberation, you have to abandon that also. You have to cease that. Until grasping at true existence is annihilated, the identity view, that means the view of the transitory collection, that's one of the 5 afflicted views, that's the main afflicted view. Until grasping at true existence is annihilated, the view of the transitory collection, the identity view, does not come to be annihilated. And on the first ground, the 3 binding factors are eliminated. So there, the binding factors is different than the fetters, right? The binding factors were the, where is he? That as Nadine, I was trying to say, remember Nadine saying, the view of the transitory collection, the afflicted doubt, and the view of wrong morality and ascetic practices as being supreme. Those are eliminated. That means the intellectually formed ones of those on the first ground. Are you following? How are we doing? Mike, Mikhail, what do you think? I interrupted you when you were going to ask a question before. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm still wondering when are these three small levels eliminated on the
Right.
seventh ground, or when?
So
we talked about the sixth,
right,
both ones.
right. So what this is saying, this is quoting from the Dasha Bhumika, right? It says in the same sutra, it states that the false attachment, aversion, and delusions which are not likely to recede for many thousand years are eliminated on this ground. This should be understood as the elimination of their seeds, and that too in terms of the specific objects of abandonment relinquished on this ground. Of the innate afflictions relinquished on the path of meditation, the first six, the three levels of the great and the three levels of the medium, are correlated with the second to seventh bodhisattva grounds. So what that's saying is, remember when I said that in the Svatantrika, they could eliminate the 9 levels, all 9, because they started from the second bhumi up to the 10th, right? So there were not, each one had one thing. So here, because you've got only 6 bhumis, you start from the second bhumi up to the 7th, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. There's 6 fingers, 6. So that they're correlated with those. So it must mean the small are abandoned at the last Vajra-like meditation at the end of the 7th bhumi. That's my interpretation.
Thank you. Get it.
So when you got to the 7th bhumi, you've gotten rid of all 6, and then the last 3 of those 9, the great small, the medium small, the small small. So they're very subtle ones. Now your antidote is very strong, and then at that point you eliminate those small smalls, or the 3 smalls. Shankar, what are you thinking?
So I'm trying to distinguish here between seeds and imprints, right? So when we say seeds here, we're talking, I mean, are the imprints the ones we're talking about in the 3 subtle most ones?
No, those are still seeds. The imprint, usually what we translate as imprints are what are called baksha in Tibetan. What is it in Sanskrit? Vasana, Paul? Something like that.
Yeah, vasana,
Vasana,
something like that. Yeah.
So those refer to the like say, even though you like the example of the garlic,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah,
so those are called imprints. The seeds have already been abandoned from the Prasangika point of view before you begin to eliminate the imprints. So that means there's some kind of subtle residue left, even that after you've gotten rid of the delusions and their seeds. It's kind of like the odor of them. I can say odor because they're not sweet smelling, the afflictions. They're kind of bad, right? So the 3 subtle levels of the delusions and their seeds have to be abandoned sometime at the end of the 7th bhumi. That's my interpretation, because it's from the Prasangika point of view here, because he's quoting the 10 Bhumi Sutra, that of these 9 levels, 6 of them correlate the 2nd through the 7th bhumi. That leaves the 3 smalls, the great small, medium small, small, small. They have to be abandoned at the end of the 7th bhumi. That's my
I see. And so you're saying then that, so you removed all the seeds now at the end of the 7th, by the end of the 7th bhumi, but you still have the imprints. And that's what you're working on the 8th and the 9th.
8th, 9th, and 10th, right? Those are called the pure bhumis. They're called the pure bhumis because they're purified of all of the afflictions. KT, what do you think?
I was thinking about this, and I had a small teaching with Geshe Pende at Drepung. He mentioned that these small, big, the small, medium, and the small, small were actually abandoned for him. He said on the 8th bhumi, part A, but he called it 8th bhumi, part A. Just sharing that.
Okay, so he said that Nagarjuna said. Where we just said that Nagarjuna said, no, in Precious Garland, Nagarjuna's Precious Garland states, until the 8th ground is attained, there is no annihilation of all the seeds of the afflictions. That's what Jeffrey put in that extra word, all there. So that means once one has attained that 8th bhumi. So what does that mean? When do you attain the 8th bhumi? You attain the 8th bhumi at the end of the 7th bhumi in meditative equipoise that is acting as an antidote to the last delusions to be abandoned. So maybe that's what he's referring to, 8th bhumi, part A. You haven't, until they're abandoned, you haven't achieved the 8th bhumi. So I would quibble about calling it 8th bhumi part A, but anyway, maybe from Drepung, maybe they have, maybe the monastic textbook of Drepung has a different take on it. Okay, let's just try to get a little bit further here. We just have we're already past 3, but just let me say a little bit more here. So the commentary, that means the Madhyamaka Vatara Bhasham, Chandrakirti's auto-commentary, does not speak explicitly of the abandonment of the acquired afflictions on the first ground. He says from the first ground. And it doesn't speak explicitly about the elimination of the innate afflictions on the second ground onward. So it's not mentioned in Chandrakirti about this differentiation between acquired and what's the other word? Innate delusions. But Nagarjuna's Precious Garland states that until the 8th ground is attained, there is not a total annihilation of all the seeds of the afflictions. So when you have that, it should be, all of them should be abandoned. Grasping a true existence must be considered an affliction. Until grasping a true existence is annihilated, the view of the transitory collection, that Jimba calls the identity view, does not come to be annihilated. And on the first ground, the 3 binding factors are eliminated. So when he's sort of giving those one after the other, in Jeffrey's text, he mentions which stanzas in the Precious Garland those are abandoned on. And I didn't put that note here. Let's end right there because we've already gone over. Before we finish, any questions? This was a little bit tough, right? It looked like, man, this should be a breeze. But a lot of subtle factors here, the 9 levels. When we talk about delusions, when we talk about samsara in general, we say the 6 realms, right? So we're dividing the desire realm into 3, into what do we call it? Into 6 realms, right? When we talk 6 realms, that means the 6 realms of the desire realm. Here we're just lumping them as one, the desire realm, and then we're also adding the minds of the first form absorption, the second, third, fourth, so 4 more. and then the 4 levels of the formless realm. So that adds up to be 9 levels. Each of them have these 9 levels of subtlety of afflictions that are to be abandoned, because as your collection of wisdom and merit increase, the antidote's getting bigger, so it can start to get more and more subtle, like the small, the great small, the medium small, small, as you go along. Okay, Russia.
Yes, I do have a question, and I'm sorry if this is a very simple question, but no, I am not at the level of.
I'm a simple person, so that's good for me.
So when we talk about the 4 absorptions, these realms and the 4 consciousness, are these bodhisattvas that are training, in this path, are bodhisattvas that are training in the paths achieve these 4 realms of absorption and the 4 realms of consciousness on their meditative state? Because for me, in my mind, and I'm not versed in this, is either you're an animal or a preta or a human, and are you or a human or a being in the formless realm of absorption or constant.
Yeah.
But so again, going back to the question, is the human bodhisattva training on these paths achieving those 4 absorptions or 4 concentrations in his meditation or her meditation?
Yeah, because the way that they are obtained in terms of being a human being and meditating, you're using the mundane vipassana, which means actually it's a union of tranquil abiding and vipassana, tranquil abiding and penetrative insight. So that means a meditative state. So that can be attained even before entering the path, even before the path of accumulation. You can develop these dhyanas, they're called the 4 form concentrations, and the what do they call it? Samapati, I guess it is the absorptions of the formless realm. There are all kinds of concentrations. They're only obtained in meditative context.
But
as a result of that, you can be born in those realms, but that's another question. The bodhisattvas generally they see no advantage to be born in those realms. So on the path of seeing, when they no longer are thrown into the realms by the maturation of their karma, they can choose to be born there. They can be born there because of that virtuous karma, contaminated karma, but they generally don't choose to be born there because in the formless realm, there's no one to help, right? They do, in meditative state as a human being, they do enter into these and they jump around sometimes for practice. They go from usually to go to the second form concentration, you have to achieve the first concentration, then they go to the second, then to get to the third, you have to go from the second to the third, but they jump from the first to the third, the formless absorptions back down. That was talked about earlier when we had some of our earlier lectures. That kind of terminology of jumping over also in Dzogchen is talking about something else, but it's similar kind of terminology. So they don't tend to take birth there. They may achieve some of the concentrations of the form realm to meditate on emptiness, and they may achieve the formless realms to meditate on emptiness, not the highest one, because the mind is too subtle, but they don't generally take rebirth there. And to achieve those states, they have to do it in meditative equipoise.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Someone else have a question? Jennifer, how are you doing? You okay?
Slowly getting back.
Okay, slowly getting back.
Ida has
Doris.
Ida has one.
Oh, Ida. Okay.
Well, maybe not today, but perhaps one day we could talk about the 7 preparations for the first concentration. And then there's the modes of ascending for the formless realm, something like that.
Who said we? So maybe why it should. So we could, but generally those subjects are talked about in the subject of samsuk that I mentioned before. So it's all sorts of details. We can go a little bit about that, but it probably not necessary a lot right now. I just wanted to check in. Doris, how are you doing? I noticed you had your hands on your head. You're okay?
I was just relieving some shoulder tension. Sorry.
Oh, okay. It's not that you.
My brain's in.
Not like your
Yeah.
was exploding. Okay, that's good.
Both. Yeah.
Ron, you okay? Anything that you wanted clarified? No. Okay. Anna, William, you're okay?
The if one were not a bodhisattva practitioner but a Pratyeka Buddha or somebody, would this progression lead then to a type of nirvana or a type of realization for those people? The reason I'm asking this is maybe this difference between the 7th and the 8th in terms of where the most subtle things are eliminated, is there a goal? I mean, the goal is omniscient Buddhahood for the bodhisattva, but is there another state short of Buddhahood? I mean, does no Hinayana practitioner ever become a Buddha?
Well, we talked about this before. So from
I'm sorry.
present Giga point of view, all beings eventually will become Buddha, even those who achieve nirvana. According to Hinayana tenets, that's like in some of the tenets, that's a stopping point. The mind no longer, for some of them, the mind no longer exists. You're just extinguished. For some, they might say that you remain in meditative equipoise on emptiness forever. But in the Mahayana in general, it's said that those Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas who've achieved their respective enlightenments, their respective nirvanas, for them they're still called they're bodhis, right? Their end goal, that they remain in that for many eons in meditative bliss. And eventually, when the karma that sustains their samadhi, their concentration begins to be used up, the karma, they are awakened by the Buddhas and told that they have not yet achieved the final goal. And they're convinced by that. I guess the Buddha has good persuasive power. And they're already wise, these people, and they realize they have to take rebirth again in samsara, in cyclic existence, and practice. They have to go through the path of accumulation, preparation, path of seeing of the Mahayana. Even though they've realized emptiness, they haven't accumulated the merit that the bodhisattvas did on those stages. And so they have to take a long time to overcome their self-cherishing thought that they have entrenched with to get out of samsara, right? That was their goal, was to get out of samsara. They were thinking of themselves. So they eventually will achieve enlightenment going through these same paths. So in one sense, when they're on the path of seeing, and when they enter into the bodhisattva path, they don't have to get rid of the delusions because they're already gotten rid of, but they have to accumulate the merit and other qualities that the bodhisattvas developed on those bhumis. And then once they get to the 11th level of the 8th bhumi, which doesn't mean that only they've gotten rid of the delusions, they've also now accumulated this incredible amount of merit that the bodhisattvas would have accumulated by that time, then they can start getting rid of the obstructions to omniscience, and they will eventually become Buddhas. Okay, so we covered a lot of things, some sort of more simple, some that, we need to fill in things in our expertise, and some quite subtle things today. So let's put up, Mary-Ellen, the dedication prayer. So try to think of the meaning here. You can meditate, due to these virtues, gewadi, that means due to these virtues, we've collected virtuous karma. May I quickly, nirdu dak, nirdu means quickly, dak means I. May I quickly attain, may I quickly become a guru Buddha. That means a Buddha who has that intention of benefiting sentient beings, as a guru, a teacher, and from that state lead all migrators without exception, even those who we can conceive of now as our enemies or people we're not interested in, without exception, lead them into that very same enlightened state. And from the prayer of Maitreya, may the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not, oops, are you still there? Can you see me? Did I lose you?
We can, I can see you.
Still good,
Okay.
George.
Okay, so somehow when my phone rang on my computer, I lost. Let me get back to Zoom here. There we go. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen yet in my mind stream, may that be given rise to, may that be born and grow, and may that which has arisen already, whatever little tendrils of bodhicitta I have, may it not diminish, may it not be lost, but increase evermore. And then the dedication prayer, for our long life prayer to our spiritual friends, Gewe Shenyan. You who are eyes for me to view all the infinite scriptures, you're the supreme gateway, entranceway for we fortunate beings who are traveling to liberation, engaging as you do with skillful means, moved by mercy, love, sewa. Here is his love. All illuminating spiritual friends, please live a long and stable life. And then the prayer for the quick return of Lama Zopa. Do you have that, Mary Ellen? And Lama Zopa's now visiting maybe the pure realms. Who knows? Maybe he's already been reborn, but he hasn't been identified yet. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the conquerors, the Shravakas, as well as the Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang Drakpa, Lama Tsongkhapa, you who are the spiritual father along with your two spiritual sons, Gyaltsab-che, Khedrub-che, as well as the lineage masters, all objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow here and now the virtue of goodness of accomplishing this prayer. You, Lama Zopa, who held and spread the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you who wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged, incomparable venerable Guru, to you I make this request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the conqueror's teachings, Buddhist teachings, which are the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and while striving single-pointedly for mother's living beings, you suddenly departed to peace, means you passed away unexpectedly. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving, the unerring truth of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas, the conqueror's children, may the smile of the reincarnation of Lama Zopa Rinpoche swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. So that although that's a prayer, we can dedicate our merits that way, thinking due to these merits, whatever obstacles there are to Rinpoche's appearing in the world, not from his own side, but from the side of his disciples, may they be eliminated through the merits I've created. And due to these merits, may I not simply receive some superficial happiness in the future, some icky, picky, teeny weeny happiness in the future, but in whatever way it ripens, may it become the cause of my continued spiritual development and rebirth as a human, life by life, up to and including my achievement of enlightenment, for the very sake of being then able to effortlessly and spontaneously, without error, leading all sentient beings out of ocean of suffering that they now experience. Even if they think they're rich on a yacht and powerful, they will go to the hell realms in the future, not realizing that they're within this ocean of cyclic existence. May I lead them out of the ocean of cyclic existence into the everlasting blissful happiness of enlightenment. Having made that conventional dedication, which ensures that the merits are not exhausted in just one event in the future, now seal it in the emptiness of the three spheres so that those merits can't be inadvertently destroyed when we get angry, have wrong view, abandon the Dharma, and other situations like that. The merits that I've created exist conventionally. I may even have a mental image of them, but they are merely imputed by my mind. The goals dedicated to the quick identification of the reincarnation of Lama Zopa, my continued spiritual development, birth as a human, and so forth, up to and including enlightenment, for the sake of others, that too is just conventionally existent. We can imagine it, but it doesn't exist inherently. It's just a name we attribute to that state of enlightenment. And the act of connecting these merits with those goals, the act of dedication, can't be found anywhere. We're trying to aspire that these merits ripen in those ways. You can't find the dedication anywhere on the merits, in between, and the goal. It's just a name given to that process, like the name given to walking. All these three are empty of inherent existence. So having meditated in that way, that helps to protect those merits from destruction by anger and so forth, as we've learned in our text. So thank you very much for your patience. I've gone over a lot. I'm sorry. We'll have discussion group on Monday. Look forward to seeing you then. Take care of yourselves. Get over jet lag, Jennifer, and see you soon. Take care.